And so I'd like to give you first a little history about lavender, which I was really excited to find out myself after doing some reading. And it seems that the Egyptians learned how to make perfumes with lavender. When Tutankhamun's tomb was opened in 1922, some 3,000 years after it had been sealed, the urns were found with traces of lavender. Cleopatra seduced both Julius Caesar and Mark Antony with the help of lavender perfume, or spikenard as it was called back then. Spike refers to the shape of the flower. And then later in history, we find it again in Roman times. Pliny the Elder declared that lavender helped the pains of those bereaved or suffering melancholy. And the Roman soldiers were so impressed with its healing qualities that they took it with them into battle to dress their wounds. And then the first written record was in the Greek journal in 77 AD, when Dioscorides, a military doctor, wrote, and this is a quote, ye decoction of its is good for ye griefs in ye thorax. He noted it had benefits with upset stomach, jaundice, and dropsy. I think dropsy was like fainting, sounds like. But so then we go to the medieval times, and in 1301, we go to medieval Britain, and the monks, you've probably heard, they were responsible for writing all of the herbs in Latin and their knowledge of herbal law. And lavender was listed among the herbs grown at Merton Abbey. This was perhaps the first hint of a role that the surrounding region would play in the history of English lavender. The monks discovered that the oil of lavender was effective in treating head lice, which back in the Middle Ages, a lot of people had head lice. And now we come to the Victorian era, and this is my favorite. Ladies in this era found that laying their linens across lavender in full bloom would fragrance them, and all of the household would have a good night's sleep. It also became a hotline to Cupid. If a maiden wanted to know the identity of her true love, she would sip a tea made from lavender on St. Luke's Day while murmuring, St. Luke, be kind to me in my dreams. Let me my true love see. Most people of the Victorian era did not understand anything about germs or viruses, but they did know that it was important to keep the air clean with lavender because of the plagues, and they had a lot of that. And the Victorian ladies gathered lavender, thyme, and oregano and placed these herbs on the floor. And as the family walked on them, the essential oils were released into the air. And this would clean the air. So they were doing what they were supposed to do. And then we get to the Queen Elizabeth era in the 16th century. Queen Elizabeth I of England was devoted to lavender tea to treat her frequent migraine headaches. She adored lavender so much as a perfume, she encouraged the development of lavender farms in England. And that's where that first started with Queen Elizabeth. And then into more modern times, by the 19th century, lavender appeared in the London pharmacopoeia as an ingredient of palsy drops, cold distempers of the head, nerves, migraines, vertigo, melancholy, and acne. And then during World War II, modern antiseptics were in such short supply that the public was asked to gather garden lavender so the oil could be used together with sphagnum moss to treat the war wounds. I mean, that's pretty impressive that they were able to do that. But the largest producer of lavender today is France, in the sun-baked slopes of Provence. It is the center of the perfume industry. Originally brought to the area by the Romans, lavender naturally likes the slopes of France with all its well-drained soil. There are many other producers worldwide, including Spain, Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, Bulgaria, Australia, Japan, Canada, and America. So the ancient Romans and the monks were right in their assessment of lavender's antiseptic properties and for the treatment of melancholy, migraines, nerves, head lice, and insect bites. For centuries, the herb of the countrysides were where the people's medicine chest was, and played a huge role in healing all kinds of ailments. The practice of aromatherapy is a new one introduced in 1920, but the practice goes back many thousands of years. Today, lavender is used in compresses for dressing wounds, applied to the forehead to relieve congestion, headaches, sinuses, hangovers, tiredness, exhaustion, and tension. And it can induce sleep and ease depression. So, if you're looking for inspiration to grow lavender, you don't have to look farther than the benefits of the plant itself. Even if you simply grow it for its beauty, it's worth the effort. And that's just my little history lesson there. So what I wanted to show you today was pretty simple things that you can do with lavender. And I just tied a simple bunch from the garden with some cord. I bought some of this burlap from Joann's and I cut a little piece. And it's very simple to just lay the lavender on this little piece and make a beautiful little covering just like that. And you can lay it anywhere in your house or on your next to your bed. I mean, for me, I love this fresh from the garden, just in a little bunch right next to my bed. And if you have your window open at night, you can smell it. It just comes, if you have trouble sleeping, it's absolutely the best thing you can do naturally anyway. And the second thing I want to talk about is soil, growing lavender. So I have learned many years doing it the wrong way, how to do it the right way. And with the knowledge of soil comes the ability for the plants to do really well. And that's where it all begins. So on the vineyard, we have acid soil from the trees and we have clay. And those are the worst for lavender. Lavender loves, like a tomato, neutral soil. And it cannot exist in clay. One of the basic reasons is if you think of a lavender plant and the stem is at the ground level, the roots are like this, and they're right below the soil, like this. So if that soil stays wet, they call it wet feet, and the lavender is just going to die. They're unforgiving, just like rosemary is unforgiving, and lavender is too, if you've ever tried it. It also won't grow without sun. It needs as much sun as a tomato plant. You can't put it in the shade, and you can't let weeds crowd it. It will not be crowded. So what I do is I put down cardboard. It's the best insulator. And I put that down, and then I put mulch over it. And it not only keeps them cool and moist all summer, just moist, not wet, but in winter, that's another big challenge, is getting that through winter. So let's say you just bought your first lavender plant and it's small and you put it in, you did all the right things. It's in well-drained soil. Don't use fertilizer, no commercial fertilizer. This is an herb, doesn't need that. And so you got it in and you put your mulch and you did everything just right. But now you got to get through winter with it. And that's not easy because the first year they're pretty sensitive. Their roots haven't really gotten in great yet. They take I think a few years, like 3 years in my estimate. So what I do is there's a million rocks on your property or bricks, anything heavy. And that's what I do. I put bricks around where the roots are, which is probably in a little, maybe 10-inch diameter around a small plant. And that helps them survive. I've had more luck with that than anything anybody else can tell you. It's just that you have to protect them. They can't take wind shear. If you ever notice when in the spring, half your plant is dead, that's usually wind shear, and we get a lot of wind on the vineyard. So I plant a lot of my really good ones next to the house. If you have a corner of your house where, part of your house goes this way and that way, you want to put the lavender right there in the sun because it's protected from wind and it's going to get that sun, and it's just, they love that. In the edging of garden where you have maybe a rock wall, you want to put the lavender near the rock wall because again, the rocks will protect the soil around it, and it loves that heat in the summer and the protection it affords over winter too. So there are many things that you can do to be successful with lavender. And that's by far the most important that I think of when I talk about that. And watering, the first year you put them in, you have to water them. And people will tell you, oh, they like drought. Not the first year, you'll lose it. You will, because they haven't established yet. So then there's trimming. So you have your lavender and you want to look at it in the garden. You don't want to pick it. That's okay, except if you don't trim it, what's going to happen? The lavender will make these arms, I call them. And then all you're going to get are these lanky things coming out. And sometimes you'll get some spikes from those, and sometimes you won't. But the whole thing will go wobbling and be awful. I mean, you just rip it out and start over because you can't cut into that hardwood to get it back again. So when you put it in, that first year it blooms, cut it like they do on the farms in a mound. And this is a knife I bought on a lavender farm in Long Island. And it's the best thing. If any of you have arthritis like I do, using a scissor is painful. You don't have to do that with this. You just grab the bunch, it cuts it just like that. And you've got your bunch without hurting your hand. And so this is invaluable. But so cutting it in that nice oval shape, you will have in a few years, that thing could be 3 feet wide and you'll get enough lavender to put all over your home. I mean, that's how prolific they can be, but not if you don't trim them right. Now, a lot of people say don't go in the hardwood. Well, that's right, but I have trimmed into some of the hardwood, not the whole plant, but when I see a leg going off, if I've missed an area, I'm going to cut that back. And 9 times out of 10, right where I cut it, it'll start coming up the way it should, behind that. So you can do it. You can save them if they've gotten leggy. You don't have to rip them out, really. But you want them in that oval shape. That's the key. Otherwise, they get wacky. They have to be trimmed. So even if you don't want to trim it and you want to leave it until the sun burns the beautiful blooms, just go out there in the fall and trim it back. And in the summer, if you've missed the fall and you say, oh, I didn't get out there, in early spring, you can do that trimming. Just trim all that dead stuff off the top. And you'll see it'll start coming out beautiful. So there's the trimming. And so I like to ask if anybody has questions. I'd be happy. Yes.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Can you grow the lavender in pots?
You can, but again, you're going to have to really pay attention to drought and not letting it sit in a pot of water when it rains. You can, but you're going to have to be mindful of it. They grow best in the ground. They really do. You can do it, but it's going to be your job to make sure it's okay. And that might not, sorry. Shut that off. Bad phone. Yeah.
I have a couple of questions. I think they're related. One is, I've heard that you really shouldn't transplant lavender once it's established. I'm yearning to, because I have a giant perfect mound.
How big? Like 2
it's
feet, 3 feet
perfect.
wide?
Yeah, it's just gorgeous.
Yeah.
But I'd like to put it in a better spot to view.
Well, it's not that it can't be done,
Yeah,
but you and I probably couldn't do it.
okay.
You might hire a gardener, one of the landscape companies, because they have to take all the dirt around it. You cannot disturb the roots
Okay.
and anything under it. And they have the equipment to do that, like those backhoes, you know, whatever they have a big equipment is good. But you and I can't do that. And you would kill it if you tried.
Okay.
There's no way I wouldn't even attempt to move any of my big ones. Like, but one this big,
Yeah.
that high, just take your shovel and take all the dirt out so it doesn't even know it moved.
Okay.
And then you can do it.
Okay.
If you're gonna just start like take a fork and just pull it out with the roots in the air, and I'm not, forget about it. You might as well.
I might have to design a house around the lavender.
That's a better idea. You don't want to kill it.
And the second question is pruning. Do you prune early spring? Do you prune in the fall? Do you prune say this is the ground,
Uh-huh.
prune down to the thicker woody stalks.
Don't go too far into that wood.
Okay,
You can, like I said, a little bit, if you have one of the legs that went out, I would lop that off because the main plant will be okay. But you can't cut all into the hardwood, the whole thing. That's not good. But so when you'll see the plant, I'll just pull one of these out. So here's your stalk, okay? And down, let's say down here is the main plant right there. And here's all the wood up to this point. And then it goes green, right where this begins. You'll see the little green leaves, and then this comes up. It's fine to cut just a little bit below that, where that hardwood stops right there, because that thickens it up. Then the following year, when you cut that piece, it gives you more. So you'll get more than just the one. But you can't absolutely give it a crew cut.
right.
That's not good.
Right, fall versus spring.
So I like to, when I cut the lavender in spring, it's usually mid-June, the beginning of July. I like to do my trimming when I cut it. So I cut lower than need be. It's taking maybe this much more of the green with all those leaves on it, because then I don't have to do so much work in spring, because now it's already got its nice little shape. But if you don't want to do that, you just want to cut across and take all your nice blooms in the spring, that's fine. But then in the fall, you're going to have to trim it back again before it greens up. It has a gray look to it over winter, you've noticed. And then all of a sudden you'll see maybe in April, there's some green going on there. You know, the leaves that come out are a little green. So that's right before that's happening, that's a good time to trim, because it hasn't set the blooms out. You don't want to cut those off, because then you're not going to get these. So you got to be careful about when. But I would just be mindful of not taking the stems in spring. Watch what you're doing. It's got to be very early before it ever did that. And taking the old junk off is more important. There's a lot of dead white branches under the lavender. If you lift it, you'll see. And if they're that dead, you can just pull them out. And that's what I do. I go through the whole bush and make sure it's just where I want it, just nice like that.
Thank you.
Did you have a question, Donna?
Varieties that you suggest,
Oh,
Andrea?
so these are free handouts up here, and I think there's some over there. And so many people ask me at my lavender booth that I was explaining the same thing over and over again, so I made this. This tells all the questions that everyone's always asked me, what varieties I grow that grow really well here. And there's a list of what to-dos and not to-dos. So that's all addressed right here. And my favorites are, of course, these real purple ones, that deep purple everybody loves. And there is, oh, that's what I want to tell you. So this is just one catalog, but most catalogs that sell lavender. And here, no, that's not lavender. I have a page. Let me just get to the page. Here it is. So there's a relatively new lavender, and it's called Phenomenal Lavender. And they do sell it here. I've seen it at SBS. That is absolutely beautiful. They show a little picture here of it. But if you're just starting out, I suggest lady lavender. It's short. You can even grow it from seed, which is not easy to do with lavender. And it's very purple. And it's very tough. I think it's a tough little lady. And so starting out with lady is a good deal. You'll like it. And I like the hip coat. It comes short and tall. And the short varieties, like lady, come up first in June. But then they have the tall varieties that are this big. And those come out in July. Mine are like two times. And I'm glad, because if everything bloomed at once, I'd be over my head. So you pick the little stuff first, and then you have another week or two before the big stuff comes up. So you might think about that with the variety you're buying. It'll tell you how many inches it grows, and you'll know which is the giant and which is the shorter one, just by the variety. Yes.
When you say you cover kind of the outskirts with brick or
Yeah.
something,
Rocks, yeah.
rocks, do you leave them there?
Oh, all winter.
And what about in the spring and summer?
In the spring and summer, you can take them away.
Okay.
Yeah, they don't need to be there. But this is protection because those roots are so shallow. Like I said, I put the cardboard and then I put mulch and then I put the bricks and the rocks. And now they're gonna make it. I don't lose any plants anymore. And I was losing them like crazy, like what's going on here? Why won't they, but that's it. They can't take severe cold. They are tolerant, but they're kind of on the edge. The English is the best. The French is not for outside here. That is absolutely, I don't think it's rated for this far north as we are. You can grow it in a pot in the house if you try, but you gotta spray it with water. It's like rosemary. They don't like the dry heat of our homes, so they show it. They don't like it. But if you're wanting to do that, then it becomes your job. But outside is best for these kind. Any other questions from anybody? No? Yes.
So is that Provence that's the one that doesn't grow as well? I mean, there's Munstead and Provence, you see that at all the nurseries.
Yeah, check on the label because there's so many varieties and I don't quite remember, but it should tell you the zone that it grows in. And if it says 9 and 10, that's the French. Don't unless you're going to keep it just for the summer, like an annual, that's fine. But you want the ones that are rated for this area, 4, 5, 6, which is the English. You always can, the English is the standard for this area.
One more question.
Yes.
A few years ago, I bought a whole bunch of Hidcote and Munstead,
Mhm.
and the tags came off over the winter.
Yeah,
I don't know which is which, but they're distinctly different visually.
okay,
There's one, like the big moundy one I described,
yeah,
and I want to make sure I get that one. The other one is just leggier and not pretty in habit.
is the color different, the lavender spikes?
One of them is very pale blue, pale purpley blue, very
Uh-huh.
pale, and the other is a deeper, more like that.
Yeah, 'cause this is a hip coat,
Okay.
it's darker. But there is also some Munstead. Yeah, that's hard to tell. You might just look at the books and try to go by that, because it sounds like one of them is not doing well. It's been leggy and,
Yeah, all of the one type, and I forget which is which.
okay,
Okay,
okay.
I'll check. the
Yeah, I mean, hip coat for me is the fabulous one. I mean, I love it. And the Munstead, the ones I have are pretty short. They're not tall at all.
Okay.
Even their bloom is only on a stem maybe that long, but it's so deep purple. It's so beautiful. I mean, when I collect it, you can even pick it out between all my lavender in a bag. You can see the darker ones in here. So when I do at home, I get just like a bowl like this. And then after I've taken it all off here, which is very simple, I just take the tops and I put it in my hand like this and it goes all over the paper. And this is what you're left with. And it's beautiful. You put this out, put it next to your bed, put it in your kitchen, wherever you are, and you can't beat that. It's just so happy. But now there's lots of culinary uses for lavender. And there's one here, it's a lavender avocado loaf with lemon. Lemon and lavender go together so delicious. This one is lavender shortbread cookies, and these are all for you to take if you want. And that's what I made over here. And they're made, of course, they're made with butter, but they're made with fresh lavender or dried. You can use dried. And this one has mint leaves and lemon zest. Oh, it's such a nice combination. And if you really want to get fancy this summer, you can make lavender lemonade. And it's pink. It's incredible. It's so pretty. And it's just dried lavender, boiling water, a little sugar, a little lemon, but there's so much you could do with it. You can even put it on meat. But remember, it's like rosemary or sage. They're very strong herbs. a little goes a long way. It's not like basil or parsley, you can throw it in and it doesn't matter. This matters, it's very strong. And the good news is the deer don't eat it. So you can put it outside your garden, you don't need it inside anything, no, the raccoons, the squirrels, the moles, the whatever else eats everything you have, they're not gonna touch the lavender, which is great. I actually saw a deer one time nibbling my lavender and I went, no. And it just was like, and it kept going and I went, yes. I must have been young. Scared the life out of me. So one of the last things I wanted to talk about was, and this is kind of a little off subject, but not really. I took a class at Featherstone this year, and I've taken pottery in on the wheel, but they offered a slab one. And I can't tell you, if any of you like to just have a little hobby and do something you've never done before, take that class in slab pottery. I just rolled it out like dough, the clay, and you just cut it with a knife like you're making cookies. And I made garden markers. And I made dozens like this. I mean, it's not finished yet. This was fired one time, and I'm gonna put a glaze on the bottom and a glaze over here. It gets fired again, and then it's done. This one says parsley. It's just a little cookie cutter, you know, you just press the little letters in. And that, I mean, I couldn't believe it out of a whole thing. And then I get a little more involved. And again, just roll this piece out and I cut it with a knife. And then I made a little piece like this. And I drew a little lavender sprig on here. And I made myself a little, I'm gonna put succulents in here and hang it on the wall in the greenhouse. I was like, isn't that cute? I mean, yeah. I would take that class. I mean, the ladies were so nice. The instructor was a doll, and it's so easy to do. And you'll have so much fun. You can make lavender spikes and put them everywhere in the garden, and you won't lose them like the wood ones. How many times have you lost the wood? Like you lost it, right? You won't lose it again. So I would like you to taste the lavender cookies.
Andrea, when did you harvest this lavender?
This was last fall. I get 2 blooms a year out of some of my plants, which is very unusual. But this is one of those big lavenders, and I just loved it. So I picked this in late fall in October, right before it got cold. This thing just went crazy, and this actually goes in my bedroom, right on the dresser. So I just love it. I mean, you can smell it.
How long will it last, Andrea? Years?
A good year, because there's a lot of light in my bedroom. And so if you're putting lavender out in your house, keep that in mind. It will fade, the light will fade it, for sure. But when you pick it, you want to tie it in a rubber band and hang it upside down in a dark place until it's dry, which takes maybe 2-3 days, that's it. And then you can bunch it all together and put it in a vase, or bunch it like I showed you, with this. Just a little piece of burlap. You don't even have to get fancy. And some cord, and it's beautiful. Put it all around the house.
Andrea, how many plants do you have on your property?
Oh, there's probably 600 or 700. Yeah, and it sounds like a lot, but it doesn't look like a lot to me because they're squished in. I don't have I wasn't smart enough to take the string like my father taught me and put it in the ground and put everybody in a line. I just said, oh, I'll put some here and I'll put some there. Oh, over here, it's empty here and it's empty there. So it's all over the place, but I love it. It doesn't really matter to me. But yeah, I didn't do it properly. Like my father would say, do it the right way. So I just send these around and help yourselves. And that recipe's here if you're interested. And are there any other questions? No? Okay. I think that was the cookies, yes. Well, yeah, can't think of anything else.